Start. That Isabel Fox girl just texted me today. I look forward to seeing you today.
Who?
That Isabel Fox girl.
Oh, okay. Just be like,
Calling Urge.
I think she thinks she's talking to me. Just be like, I'll see you at 4. It's fine.
Welcome to the Elvis Retreat Home.
Shut up, George.
Oh, wait. That's gonna take like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Hours, yeah. No, but no. I think.
I'm coming.
Forget that.
I'm walking.
I'm gonna-
I am.
That's go.
Microphone check. Can you guys hear us today? For the most part, yeah. Can you hear me on here? Appreciate you guys' patience. We should be starting here pretty soon. Just waiting on Commissioner to come up.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I'm late. Better late than never, I guess. But we're going to jump right into it because I have everybody waiting. Your time is very important. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And I just want, Patrick, maybe you can start. We'll go around and get everybody coming up to join us. All right, great.
Yeah, Patrick Waters, Acting Chief Counsel.
Hi, I'm Monica Breedy with Wyandotte Economic Development Council, sitting in for Greg Kendall.
David Johnston, County Administrator.
All right, got one more.
Dwayne Bright, Fuse Executive Fellow, Housing Coordinator.
So we have Jennifer Mills.
Yeah, Jennifer Mills, American Family Insurance, West Height neighborhood.
Ross.
Ross Stewart here, Stewart Law, private attorney. Thank you.
All right, then Alyssa. We can't hear you, Alyssa. I think we know who you are, Alyssa Marcy. Planning. Still can't hear you. Do we have Jaquise?
Yes, Jacques Barber, private citizen and former small business owner.
Kimberly?
Hi, all. Kimberly DeWitt Consultancy Partners.
Mr. Johnson?
Bill Johnson, General Manager, Board of Public Utilities.
All right. Then who we have? Commissioner? Oh, we have Townsend, sorry. Patricia?
That's Ms. Townsend.
Patrice Townsend, Board of Public Utilities, Utility Services Department.
And Colleen?
Yeah, Colleen Roberts with Reese Nichols Real Estate in Wyandotte.
And Myra?
Myra Thomas Romero from Burritos to Go.
Great. Again, thank you all for being online and joining us here in person. And I cannot say I'm sorry enough. I apologize for being late. It's really unacceptable. But today our agenda was primarily focusing on making sure you had a chance to meet our county administrator and have him be able to maybe articulate some of his thoughts with regards to economic development from his background. Mr. David Johnston is here, and I just asked for him just maybe to introduce himself and kind of just have a free-flowing conversation and see where we go from there.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate the invitation. You're going to be talking about a possible tool for a toolbox to help our community stay vibrant. So I look forward to seeing that discussion. Just a little bit about my background. I have over 25 years of professional local government management experience, primarily as a city manager, town manager, village administrator. In those roles with those communities, I've been the Chief Economic Development Officer and have had numerous opportunities to work with state and federal agencies and elected officials to see how they can help our community, updating the vision statement and economic development strategic plans of communities so we could chart our course forward and understand what tools we had to use to entice investment into our community. And also got into the wider issues of economic development, which is dealing with workforce development, trying to do dealing with labor supply issues and working with the partners, whether it's community college or university, to help mitigate that, worked with our local school districts as they were discovering that there was probably a new way to approach preparing their students for the workforce. Not everyone, they found, should go through a college-based program that will get them into college. There are some that they're more trade oriented and they're should be geared toward vocational training. Others just may not be ready for college and need to sit for a couple years, and then they work with them as they graduate and discover a placement in the world as they mature, grow up, and all that. So we work with our school districts as they have been handed a wider responsibility in student development as opposed to just straight prepare them for college. I've recruited businesses to our community, worked with developers and landowners with strategic development proposals. So it's a wide range, and I believe it's well-rounded, and I hope I can contribute to the prosperity and vibrancy of Wyandotte County, KCK.
Thank you, David. I don't know if there are anyone that's on this call that had any questions or wanted to make yourself known to Mr. Johnston. We make sure we have a T in his name and a lack of a T in my name. But are there any questions? I see Jacques, Mr. Barber.
Yes, I'd like to ask our new county administrator, in his experience, what has he found to be the most productive or successful means of promoting and supporting small businesses?
I'm glad you asked that question because data every year that comes out of the International Economic Development Council, which I've been a long member, states about 75 to 85% of your local economic growth and activity comes from small and medium businesses. I think a lot of communities try to hit the big economic development projects, but you cannot forget those who've already invested. So we've always had good, strong business retention and expansion programs where we reached out and met regularly with our small business communities. And I know that our EDC does that. We probably need to be a little more aggressive in that regard. Because of that, 75 to 85% of economic activity comes from that population. And so growth and employment growth and business growth comes from that sector. The other thing that you really need to do, whether it's dealing with the small businessman, is what type of infrastructure do you, businessman and woman, what type of infrastructure do you have to support them? I see that there is a kind of a void that exists in Wyandotte County, is that the Small Business Assistance Center doesn't have regular 2 or 3 day presence in Wyandotte County as a resource to our businesses. They're headquartered south of here, not surprising, but they should be in our backyard with programs, whether it's how do you do a business plan, how do you pay attention to tax filings, how do you deal with personnel regulations with you as an employer, so they can remain viable, legal, and they don't get into problems. So those tools don't exist here, and that probably should be one of our major efforts over the next year, is to get them back here. And you will have office hours for our small businesses. So we need to have that. We also need to have a strong working relationship with the federal government Small Business Administration, because they have a wealth of grant opportunities that we probably are leaving on the table because we're not paying attention to that area. So those are important things. How are we doing? You do need to have a support mechanism to help the small and middle businesses thrive. And I think that's a weakness that we need to shore up sooner than later.
Thank you, David, for that. Are there any other persons that have any comments, Mr. Johnston? I don't see any other hands raised. But if you do, take this moment to You have your moment.
We just do have a comment from Alyssa.
Okay.
That she would love to have more of these conversations, like this on the ongoing economic development strategy, which is hosting a vision summit next Tuesday, and she shared a link for that as well. Alyssa, where's that going to be at? Is that Wyandotte County Park or Lake?
Alyssa, you can speak, you know.
Well, as we're, is that at the location there? Wyandotte County Lake. Okay. You'll be at Wyandotte County Lake. David and I were having a conversation about this very thing a couple of weeks ago. And when you talked about the SBA piece of it, I used to work with SBA when I was in the banking industry, and I don't know why it's been lost on us that we haven't tapped into that resource rather. So I'm glad you're here and have that background to be able to share a lot of those tools with small businesses.
You know, one of the privileges of coming into the unified government at this time is we do have a number of director level vacancies. So it's an opportunity for me to develop my management team with some new hires into the UG government. And one of those things is reestablish a strong economic development department within the UG government. We have a lot of players in economic development, but not necessarily working together because they have their own mission, which is fine. But one of the roles that a government has is to make sure that everybody is regularly working for the benefit of our citizens and our business community as a whole. And that's one of the roles I think the unified government can play, is to make sure that we are paying attention to the entire community. I know probably we've talked at this committee about the appearance of the 635 demarcation line. East has more challenges. The west is turning into an amazing destination area and is attracting regular investment, but east is not. Those are challenges that we're going to have to deal with, get a handle on what the socioeconomic profiles mean as opportunities, but also as limitations, because when you're talking to an investor, you have to think like an investor, like a site selector. Not every business is going to go into a challenging neighborhood that doesn't meet their profile or needs or their experience. And so we have to come to accept the fact that we as a community have challenges and work together to mitigate those challenges into strengths, so we can attract good business east of 635, but continue making sure that there's good investment and employment opportunities where the economic engine appears to be happening now, which is the Legends area on the far west side. So it's a balancing act. As we look to establish this economic development department, we're going to be looking at all issues to make sure that we have a true comprehensive economic development system within Wyandotte County. One of the challenges, which I was kind of surprised, we have a spirit of entrepreneurism here, but we don't have accelerators or incubators to help them succeed and then become another successful small business in our community, kind of a homegrown grassroots effort. That's what those two processes help in those who want to risk and start their own small business, their venture, whatever. to make them being successful after a number of years, 3 to 5 years, a viable small business into our community. We don't have that infrastructure in place. So, you know, kind of like we talk in kind of in the life sciences from womb to tomb. Well, the economic development system, a successful comprehensive system, talks about startups, supporting entrepreneurism, dealing with the small and medium existing investors, making sure they're in place, go after new larger ones. We already have some large employers here in our backyard. We need to stay on top of the trends, economic trends that are affecting them. You know, we have a GM plant, and we've witnessed what changes can impact what would we all considered a stable industry. But you know, in the 70s, we had a significant recession with high interest rates, and that we had import vehicles come on shore to bring on the more energy efficient compact vehicles that Detroit was not producing. And then that forced that industry to adjust. And then there are issues like offshoring. Some businesses found that tax laws of other countries, the benefits of establishing offshore outweighed the extra transportation costs to bring their product back onshore into our country. And now we're seeing a reverse of that because of the supply chain weaknesses that became evident with the pandemic, where we had businesses that we rely on, that it was more difficult to get their materials to, whether it's chips, because that metal was in war zones in Russia, Ukraine, and other sensitive areas that affected the import of that into our. So that's why you see so many. There was a closed racetrack down about half hour trip from Covington, Kentucky, the old closed Kentucky Speedway, an old NASCAR track that was filled with pickup trucks. I mean, it's filled because they couldn't complete the manufacturing for the market because of that. And now they're written off, and now they're just rust buckets. And so now it's scrap, and it taking time to do that. So, you know, those are forces that we as a local level, whether it's Joe and Sally Citizen, whether it's local government, whether it's our businessmen and women, that need to pay attention to those issues that are beyond our control, but will affect them. And then how can we have our system work with them to make the necessary adjustments to keep them viable? You know, the pandemic upset the natural order of things. We have new work from home expectations that are affecting the Class A office space demand that just 3 years ago were in high demand. And now businesses that are looking at, that are Class A renters, even Class B renters, are assessing whether or not they need the square footage for their workers, if they could just invest a little bit with them to set up a home office. So you don't have to pay rent. We never thought of that before, but that just happened 4 years ago. And so it's amazing how we have to pay attention. Change is happening in our lives far more quickly than when I was born. And it happens at a moment's notice, and we just have to be able to be nimble and react positively. And you know, there's that saying that the best defense is a great offense. Right. And therefore we can't rest and constantly assess what impact. Sometimes we have to get an understanding of what's going on, and then work from our gut, and to keep us moving forward. So we hope to work on this comprehensive economic development ecosystem that needs to be in place here in Wyandotte County. That's the only way we're going to compete with our
Yeah.
our neighbors to the south or across the river in KCMO, is we have to be able to play in the play box or sandbox. And if we're not having this comprehensive approach, then you accept status quo. And I don't think that's what I'm hearing from citizens. I'm not hearing that from the commission and the mayor. We need forward direction, and it's going to be interesting working with this task force who's tasked to help that along.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. I was going to say, ask Dwayne and or Monica if you had anything to add to that conversation before we move on. One of the things that we have been talking about, we have not actually enacted, is to develop a small business subcommittee as part of this task force. And so my hope is that by this time next month that we'll be able to get something moving. I would ask if there are those that want to be a part of that subcommittee, if you would reach out. Brian, would it be all right for them to email you their interest being part of that subcommittee?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. Drop my email in the chat. Most of you should already have it. But if you are interested in joining that subcommittee, just reach out.
Great. David, did you have anything?
I've met with Greg at the EDC. I've met with a couple of the board members and the president of our Chamber of Commerce, and they have this hunger and to make sure that Wyandotte County shines. So we need to make sure that we take advantage of that. Otherwise, we'll get back into a malaise, kind of that means we're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a lot of topics like our friends from planning talked about the kickoff next month. It's not just leading to a development of a comprehensive economic development strategy, one that's kind of been missing in our portfolio for a while, but it's also the comprehensive plan where we're going to examine the future of our community from many different venues. And therefore, we do need that public participation. We'd like to make sure that we have the business participation in there as well as our citizens, because when you look at the challenges the unified government is facing fiscally, and we are reminded every day about how high our taxes are, there's going to probably be significant discussion over the next 2 or 3 budget cycles on trade-offs of what services our government supports in our community. That's a reality that we cannot ignore anymore. And again, we have to help keep our community viable. Might have to establish more effective working partnerships, but also maybe we have to assess what can we support with our limited resources. So it's going to be an interesting early, I don't know what I walked into, Commissioner. What'd you get me into?
I'm sure somebody tried to warn you. I know I did. But I'll say this much, we don't want, the whole topic of doing business different to be just a catchphrase. Yeah, you're right. We're going to make some very, very tough decisions over the next few months. And some people are going, there's going to be some give and take, I think that that's just part of a healthy relationship. There has to be what I consider a healthy tension amongst persons that are internal and external about how we drive the ship, particularly in an environment that we have right now economically. The word that's been kind of infused, and you kind of used a different word, but the one word that has been kind of infused in my mind is that we have to be adaptive to the various forces that we're dealing with. So I agree with that, and everybody just stay tuned because we're going to be having to make those decisions sooner than later. All that are part of this conversation, you'll be there to have this conversation as well.
It's all part of our public process, so it's not going to be in any back room. those discussions. And, there is a cost to being an elected official. You have to make a final decision one way or the other.
Right.
But our commission and our mayor are willing to take up that task. So.
If you don't mind, I'm going to kind of switch, unless anybody else has any comments or questions. All right, seeing and hearing none, I want to kind of turn the table over to Mr. Waters. That is here for a reason. We have been talking in prior meetings about a community, what do I call that? Community benefits ordinance. And on last Thursday, which I believe was the 4th of May, David and I, along with some others, Commissioner Davis, Jeff Fisher, Jeff from the legal department. I don't know, it seems like I'm missing 1 or 2 persons, but we all met to talk about a community benefits ordinance. And so Patrick has already started us off down that road. My hope is that we can have some dialogue that will lead us towards putting forth an ordinance on that this year. And so I'm going to turn it over to Patrick to kind of give us some insights as to where we're going. I think we kind of left it at, let's try to work out a draft that we can work with. But certainly we want to make sure we give this group an opportunity to weigh in and have some thought with regard to that. So Jeffrey, Jeff. That's okay. Patrick, I'm sorry. I'll just turn it over to you.
Commissioner, I think what I've heard is that the committee is more interested in what we call a structured fee program, where there's certainty for the developers, where they know going in, if I'm building this many units, I may have to provide this much to make up for a lack of affordable housing, or I have to build this many units. If it's not a residential development, the developer knows that X% of the incentive is going to be going to some type of trust fund. I think that's what I've heard. So if it's not, please let me know. I guess I do want to make sure I have the correct direction. In terms of the use of these funds, are we focusing on affordable housing only? Or are we talking about a broader subset of uses? Have we reached a consensus on, do we want this very targeted towards one use, or is it a pot that's going to be up for multiple use?
Yeah, I don't think that the directive is set in stone.
Okay.
Certainly we'll be leaning to Mr. Johnson's expertise, also Mr. Gunnar Hand as well. Mr. Bright, I don't know if you have any input on that, but to me, I don't want to just limit it per se. That's just my thought, unless it makes sense to do that. If that's the best way that we can do that, then I'm all for it. But to me, I kind of wanted to leave it somewhat more broader.
Okay.
So I'll just leave it there, Mr. Bright.
Yes, but part of the discussion that we've had is also in bringing Wyandotte County and KCK into what's taking place regionally, particularly when it comes to the incentives that are given and what's required of the developers. So in KCMO, there's a requirement that if you're going to build 100 units, 20% of those have to be maintained as affordable or attainable units. And that also is in line with what we've had the discussions with the commission about, because we've been interested in doing mixed income communities. Mm-hmm. And that's in all of our housing developments, that is the strongest way to build community is through those that are mixed income. And so that was a discussion that we had in terms of an agreement, because that is what takes place, throughout the region.
I think we've had some discussions about how narrow do we talk about this. One thing that you have to be cautious about is you do want to have some sort of focus and not have it be viewed as a slush fund. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the easiest way to do that is to decide what are the priorities that you would like to attain with this revenue that's coming in to make improvements to the community. So if affordable housing, whatever, maybe public space preservation, those are all public good aspects. You keep it manageable, maybe no more than 3 or 4 categories. So it isn't viewed as a slush fund that is discretionary and can be used for, we want to limit the hands of our commission to help attain community improvement goals.
Yeah.
As opposed to, there's always a temptation if there is no road, if there are no barriers to keep you in a parameter. It's been my experience to see councils and commissions start funding things that are not really been part of the root discussion. So that would be my advice to do that. And maybe there's 2 ways to do that. In Cincinnati, when they're really going gangbusters with housing development, particularly in the urban core, because that's the hot spot. They were saying that maybe 10% of your, whether it's new housing, whether it's a repurposed building, you have to put toward affordable housing units, or you do a payment in lieu of into a trust fund managed by the city council there. That was passed by a council, I believe, 3 years ago. There was an election cycle, and they started, developers were just paying into the payment in lieu of trust fund. The new election happened, and the new elected council had now found that just in 2 or 3 years, they amassed $14 million that had to be used for affordable housing. And they're like, where did this come from? Because they weren't part of the decision. But now the advocates, the housing advocates came out and say, well, you now have the capital that said that you needed to help mitigate the affordable housing issues in our community. And in Cincinnati, they had community redevelopment corporations. And so they decided to have them submit proposals for them that outlined how they were going to meet the mission of this money in development plans submitted to them. So it's that force focus. Now, I think there might have been some latitude when it came to commercial development for other things, not necessarily housing. But you do want to have the investor, which is the one paying into the fund, wants to know where that money's going. And if you have good, noble, community-based goals and objectives, and you limit it to a manageable area, then the angst of having to contribute goes down, because they're contributing to the betterment of their community that they're relying on for their return on their investment.
That's right.
So we need to have that mentality as we deal with that. So it's just something for you to consider, committee and Mr. Chair, that you look at limiting the categories of the use.
Yes, and when the community mentioned that portion about the affordable housing, that was just with regard to the development of new housing, developments, that there be a set aside for it, which brings us into line with what's taking place in the region. That there be so it wasn't like going to be like a fund, or a slush fund. It was going to be a straight set aside of a number of units that's attainable, and then they're for working families. And again, if there's a choice of, say, 60% median income, it'd be 60% of the median income of Wyandotte County, not of the area median income.
Right.
Area median income is approximately $97,000, whereas we're at about 50,000 median. And so these are working families. And so that was part of the discussion. And as well as Mr. Johnson, as you mentioned about the small business development and working with that, it was also to be able to bring back the WBE, MBE, and DBE requirements, those goals, because they did sunset here in Wyandotte County around 2019. And so it's about, for developers, and that's whether it's commercial or real estate development, any development takes place, that there be a requirement that there is the hiring that is taking place from Wyandotte County. And that's either in subcontractors, professional services, engineering, architecture, down the line, that we need to make sure that the numbers that we've seen, where there's only approximately 22,000 KCK residents that actually work in KCK, as opposed to the 68,000 that live outside and work in KCK. And so we really need to be able to do some things, because, and then being reasonable, we'll say for the life of the investment, for the life of the incentive, for those units to be affordable. But for sure, when it comes to the working, because what we're dealing with is that major gap between what it costs to rent, buy, or build a new home or house and what our residents are making. And so we've got to figure ways how we got to close that gap. Employment opportunities, we're giving incentives, you're going to give, give back by hiring, our people, as opposed to bringing everything in.
I want to make sure, not to cut you off, but I want to make sure because time, even though I'm late, we make sure that those that are online have comments. Brian, is anybody putting in the comments area there, or do we have anybody that wants to have anything to say before we kind of begin to try to codify this a little bit?
I think Alyssa was mentioning the comprehensive plan process where they have the pizza and planning on Tuesdays.
Okay.
It's going to be at the livable neighborhoods on State Avenue.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa.
I'd
Go ahead.
like to mention with the affordable housing and the residents leaving our county, they're typically leaving our county and taking lower wage jobs. That's the information that we're finding. We need our residents to become better educated, more certified, getting certificates, to have that higher wage, to that is going to then fill that gap between the housing that they can afford and what they need. So it's really focusing on raising that household income. And I know that you guys have all heard that from Greg a million times. It's said in our office multiple times a day. So that also needs to be the focus. And when we're talking about the community benefits, it's what's going to benefit the community. What are some of those barriers to those higher wage jobs? And a lot of that is childcare and transit, as well as education. So that's some of those small categories that community benefit needs to go towards as well.
So, Patrick, what are you hearing?
Well, one thought I had is that we could have maybe, I don't want to have lots of different funds, but maybe two different funds, one for residential development and structure it similar to Kansas City, Missouri. And there's a payment in lieu. You either build it, or you have the payment in lieu that goes to that fund, and that fund is used for affordable housing. And then for our industrial, commercial, retail, those types of projects that also ask for incentives, maybe we have a separate fund for the open space or whatever, so that we're not kind of commingling those, and that the housing is used for housing and the others are used for something else.
I guess in the sake of time, if we could get suggestions to this committee on what the members would like to be considered for the categories. I think, Patrick, what I'm hearing from this discussion is develop an ordinance that mentions those two tracks, but then the use, keep them blank for now till you meet to narrow them down, and then you can just plug and chug them into the final draft for this committee's review. But we do need your ideas shared on narrowing those things, those categories for the use. And we can, then there's another meeting to have good discussion on those to finalize a recommended ordinance for commission review.
So
Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Sounds good to me. I think that maybe by next meeting, we might have a draft that we can share. Patrick, you think? And of course, once we codify all that, then the real work begins. Now we got to get it through standing committee.
Yeah.
Now we got to get it through the full commission. And I have no doubt that the ED&F probably, it would likely go through the ED&F Standing Committee. I'm sure they're gonna have some strong opinions about it one way or the other. We might have to try to talk to them in advance, let them know what's coming.
I would recommend maybe engaging with business leaders as well. I wouldn't want this to take them by surprise and, you know, they may not love it, but maybe smooth out some of those things before we have a final version so that we don't want to disincentivize
True.
people.
So what would you all recommend is the best way? I'm thinking about, you know, Wyandotte. I'm also thinking about the Chamber of Commerce. Brian had mentioned the Hispanic Chamber might have comments on it. Our NBRs might want to have something to say about it as well. So
I believe Kayla Hauer is online with us too. She is the director of the neighborhoods. And I'll mention real fast that Jennifer Mills and Kimberly DeWitt both volunteered for the subcommittee on small businesses.
Great. I was hoping you two would.
Yes, and the NBRs are working on this. They met at Rosedale about 3 weeks ago. And so it's about 4 of the NBRs, it came together. So the NBRs are having the discussions around this.
What is the objective of the NBRs? I do know I've heard about Rosedale, but what are they hoping to achieve by?
Well, they're hoping to achieve more in terms of affordable housing and jobs is what they're interested. What I was expressing, it actually came out of the NBRs, the meetings with the NBRs, because they're seeing, particularly Rosedale, they're seeing a number of developments that are coming in that do not have affordable units in it at all.
Right.
And so theirs is just continuing to go up with no support for the existing residents. And so
Do they summarize this in some type of written document that they could share with us?
Yes, I can get that from Erin Stryker. She does.
Sure. If you could have her send that to us meaning me, our chairman, our county administrator, and Mr. Perez as well.
Yes, I'll get with her today.
Okay, great. Do that. Any other thoughts with regard to our marching orders from today? I try to keep this within the hour because I value everyone's time. So I'm not going to belabor the point. I think that we have agreed on 2 things. One, putting together a small business subcommittee that will begin to tackle those issues separate from some of the more larger issues that we're talking, like for instance with the community benefits ordinance. With Patrick and Jeffrey might have us a working document that we can at least look at and then begin to make sure we get out to the proper entities outside of the UG, to the small businesses, wherever they may gather. I think I heard also that Sharon Reed in our procurement department is doing some work with small businesses. Patrick or David, have you all heard anything on that? She was at the last meeting, I know.
I know she would like to have more of those goals, WBE, MBE goals reestablished, particularly for the work for the UG. So I know that's one thing, but I also know that she's working with folks from KCMO on a number of these issues, not just procurement, but minority employment needs and things like that. So it's encouraging to have someone within UG that's working in that field with some very impressive people, by the way. So it's going to be interesting to see the byproduct of that work come out.
We'll make sure we run it past her as well, their input.
Yeah, and also one thing KCMO does that we're not pushing that far is that they actually go so far as to require the Davis-Bacon KCMO. So we're not going, that's not been the discussion to go that far. That completely changes the game significantly, the prevailing wage. So that's not something that's in the discussion.
Let's do small steps.
Yeah, for right now. Although, I mean, it does come up, and we have one commissioner in particular that's going to make sure that we never forget about it. So And I appreciate that as well. All right, any other comments for the good of the cause? All right, well, I appreciate your time. We'll reconvene next month. It'll be June. Good grief. The first Wednesday of June at 3:00 p.m. The 7th, June 7th. All right, June 7th at 3:00 p.m. will be our next meeting. And we'll try to make sure we get all this information out to you. If we can ahead of schedule, certainly it'll be available at the time that we do have our discussion. So thank you all. Have a great day and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.